Welcome back. If there's one request that has probably been pushed to me for years, is that viewers from all over the world want to hear from unfaithful females. The struggle with that is, as you can imagine, not everybody wants to put their face on camera for all the world to see. So today, I'm going to be interviewing an unfaithful female spouse. She's a great friend. However, it's going to be an audio-only video to protect her privacy, to protect her identity, and to really make it safe for her to share her heart, share her story, all in an attempt to help you understand the world of infidelity for the unfaithful female, and obviously a picture into the world of how the unfaithful female interacts with the betrayed male spouse. I hope you enjoy getting to know Melanie. Hi, Melanie.
Hey.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Absolutely.
I don't say this lightly, but this will be a real gift to people all over the world. I think there are men and women who want to hear from the unfaithful female spouse, ask me every week. And certainly people in countries where help like this doesn't come very easy. So I really just want to honor you and honor your bravery for coming in and sharing your heart and sharing your story. Why don't you tell the viewers just a little bit about your story, and then we'll be off and running.
My husband and I have been married for 30 years. My first affair started when I was 2 years into the marriage, and that was an emotional affair. Several years later, I had back-to-back physical affairs, and several years later, I had the affair that my husband eventually caught me in. D-Day for us was 2.5 years ago, May of 2017.
I'm asked the question, or actually maybe shouted the statement, or at least people will tell me all the time, women cheat for different reasons than men cheat. And certainly, you're not a therapist. What's so important is that you're sharing from your experience. In terms of understanding why you had your affairs, and you've been very open about your background. If you were to share maybe why you cheated, some reasons why you had these affairs, what do you think they would be?
That question was huge for me at the start of recovery. It was huge for me because my husband wanted to know, first of all, and it was huge for me because I knew that if I didn't get a handle on where the brokenness was inside, that I was just so prone to repeat it. I had already seen myself repeat it. I had already seen myself make inner vows and, say, I'll never do this again. And, I mean, at the front of marriage, it was, I'll never do this.
Right.
So those inner vows and those great intentions don't work. It's when you start to dig and really figure it out. So for me, the whys came from a lot of different areas of my life. And I worked through these and kind of compiled a list as I worked my recovery, as I went through the Hope for Healing course, as I worked with my therapist, as I read books on infidelity and spent a lot of time watching your video blogs and reading various articles and things in the recovery library that all kind of helped me put together a lot of the factors that I felt like could have come together to
make sense of it.
To make sense of it right, to come together to a place where I could actually do what I did.
What I find so fascinating about that and so admirable is that you were intentional about it. And there's so many unfaithful men and women that we are just not intentional. It's a haphazard video here, it's maybe read a book here but never finish it. What strikes me about what you've just said is what I have been saying from day one is you've got to be intentional. I mean, to me, you're reading, you're watching videos, you're studying, you're compiling a list. Sure. I didn't compile a list. I have it in my mind and I could write you a list, but I just want to honor the fact that you have worked on a list to understand why. And so what's on that list, do you think?
What's on that list? Well, there's family of origin issues. There's ways, patterns of living, patterns of thinking, that I began to embrace in my life, such as being able to keep secrets, managing my image all the time. And a lot of these things stem from some childhood wounds, way in the distant past, of course. And just the way that I chose to respond to those was a pretty prideful way, and it really helped to develop a very thick callus over my heart that said, you know what? I don't go where I'm not wanted. I feel that it's easier to not feel than it is to feel pain. And I realized that the reasons that people find out in their recovery work, everybody's going to have different reasons. Everybody has a different journey. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has different strengths, weaknesses, wounds, etc. There are some common things that are across the board, yes. But I think the tendency is when we first start recovery, yes, we want to know why, but the tendency sometimes, and well, I wouldn't even say sometimes, I would say probably most of the time before any recovery work is really done, the tendency is for the unfaithful spouse to keep that finger of blame pointed outward. And, it was the marriage, our marriage was dissolving anyway, or my spouse, I felt neglected, or my circumstances were just so hard, I needed an escape, blah, blah, blah. But as you go through and you get more self-awareness and you kind of peel the layers back over time, that finger starts to really point back to you, back to self, and say, it was me. I had some really faulty coping mechanisms. I had some really unhealthy ways that I thought about things, and a lot of resentments too. Just a whole lot of things ways that I left myself open, didn't guard my heart. I guess I could call myself low-hanging fruit at that point. No boundaries, etc.
The unfaithful female has a journey of wrestling with shame that's different than the unfaithful male, right? And so many people will say, and I don't agree with it, but there's this outlook in society that if a man cheats, it's acceptable. If a woman cheats, she's some kind of expletive or what have you. And certainly that's not what we believe, but it's what society will cast on the unfaithful female. Tell me a little bit about the shame that you had to wrestle through.
It was enormous. It was fed by all the secrets that I had kept for decades. It was truly a prison of my own making. But what I came to realize was that, in fact, those secrets had been feeding that shame. And as my shame was taking hold in my heart and just, keeping me there in that place, I could only focus on myself. And when that focus is just on self, it's really pretty difficult to see really the needs and the personhood of people around you.
And you said something interesting off mic. You said that for you it was the shame that kept you or kind of locked you in prison before D-Day.
Right.
Tell the viewers a little bit about that.
It was the biggest fear that I had in my life at that point, was coming clean and having myself exposed, having my actions exposed. I knew that I was going to face a very angry husband. I didn't have any clue as to how hurt he would be. But that fear really pretty much generated a lot of how I lived my life every day. But I'll tell you, when that secret was out, when I was exposed, and of course it was to the detriment of my husband, but when that all came out, when I was exposed for what I had done, there was an enormous weight that was lifted. Right. Getting that story out, it was the most feared thing I had in my mind to that point, but yet it became the most freeing thing as well. So at some point in recovery, I began working with my therapist, kind of dealing with some old childhood wounds that I had never dealt with. And I began to latch on to and make connections between those wounds and some of the ways that I had, really faulty coping skills and so forth. And so I really latched onto that. And even when we told our story for the first time as mentor couple at EMS weekend, that's kind of what I launched into was, oh, well, I was shamed as a child and, blah, blah, blah. And it all kind of stemmed from that. And I realized that even that was pointing the finger outward instead of pointing the finger inward. So I guess over the course of the past few months, that transition has started to take place where I am starting to really turn it just solely on myself. I'm seeing that no matter what wounds I had or, what unhealthy patterns developed as a result of just how I responded to those wounds, no matter if I was disappointed in my marriage, no matter if my husband was not, meeting every need that I had 100% of the time, no matter what other stressors I had in my life at that point, I still always had the ability to choose. The filter of choice was always there for me. I just failed. I failed to love. I failed to have integrity. I failed to keep my wedding vows, the vows that I promised to be faithful. So that's kind of where I'm parked right now, 2.5 years out. Just really becoming comfortable with that finger pointing squarely at myself.
One of my questions I've been waiting to ask you, just when I asked you to come in to do this interview, what do you think, in your opinion, really helped your husband heal?
Well, there were several things that I can think of. And first, I want to just kind of give a disclaimer that nothing that I can do really ever heals him. Nothing really fixes him. What I'm doing to help him heal is really just providing a safe environment that allows him time and space for him to heal. So that happens a lot of ways. Safety is just huge, especially, at first when the trauma is so intense. But the first thing, obviously, that I needed to do was cut off contact with the AP. And cutting off avenues of future possible contact, which meant that I deleted my Facebook and I blocked his phone number in my phone. I got rid of reminders of the affair, clothing I wore. We sold our car because he sat in it, and gifts that he had given, those all had to be out because those were just reminders of everything, and I just didn't want that in his face. And a really big thing, he actually gave me some input for answering this question, and so I'm trying to incorporate some things that he really said were important to him. But being totally honest and open about what happened, number one, and then being totally honest and open in just everything from that point on, because really any minor bit of deceitfulness, any lie, just eats away at the possibility of him or any betrayed spouse ever being able to trust again. He always tells me that the lies are the hardest part of any of this for him. Not necessarily what I actually did, but just the lying that I did. So, to continue lying, to continue accepting little white lies, as a norm or whatever, it just really makes you unsafe. And it screams unsafe to your spouse. And it makes them believe that we will never change. It takes that hope away from them. So that was really important for him. There were a lot of safety protocols, I'll call them protocols, that I instilled into my daily life. A lot of those ideas I got from your videos, and I was very thankful for that. But I am accountable for my whereabouts all the time. He knows where I am. He knows who I'm with. If I can take selfies of people I'm with, I do that too. He has all my passwords. He can get into my phone or my computer at any point that he wants. I stay off of social media. And something that was really kind of cool that my therapist helped me with was to come up with a plan of what ifs. Come up with a plan for, what if the AP tries to contact me again? What if I run into him somewhere? What am I going to do? And that just really helped me to have some confidence that I wouldn't be blindsided and that I wouldn't do something stupid in response that would make things worse.
And it seems so counterintuitive, but the fact that you had a plan probably helped your husband feel
Very
not 100% safe, but safer, right? It was a contingency plan.
Right, exactly, yeah. So another thing that was really important to him was just to see me taking initiative in recovery.
Absolutely. I love everything that you've talked about so far. There just seems to be such a desire to not be babysat, but to discipline yourself, to babysit yourself, to do these things on your own. And I think from the men that I've talked to, one of the most irritating, excruciating, even violating things is when the unfaithful female will not do any work or they have to be babysat. And that's true universally, men or women. Would you agree in your experience?
Oh, absolutely.
Did you feel like your husband at least could take some deep breaths because you were doing work, like from genuine, or were you doing it because you knew you needed to do it or because you wanted to do it?
Well, I think at the very start, I think I would have done anything at that point that he told me to do. But I did. I wanted to do it because I didn't want to be that person anymore. I had lived that way long enough to know that now that I was free, I didn't want to go back. And let's just take this bull by the horns and don't make him shoulder the burden for his recovery and mine too.
That's awesome. I couldn't have said it better. The fact that you just said you didn't need, I just want to restate it for those that are listening, is that you didn't want to put that burden on your husband. You've already had these affairs, and now to expect him to babysit you and bear the burden of your recovery as well as his own trauma and healing would be just asinine. I mean, if I can be that direct, that just devastates the betrayed. Sure. I think it's just phenomenal that you said it that way. What else do you think, if you were to name one more thing that just you felt like made your husband's life easier in spite of the trauma, in spite of this devastation, what would it be?
Being safe to have conversations with and just let him process verbally without me getting defensive, without me saying, well, now wait a minute, how can you think that? Which I admit I didn't do perfectly.
Sure.
But I think that for him, that was a really, really important thing. Just having room to vent, having room to speak all the doubts that he had, and because this really just turned him upside down inside. He everything that he believed went out the window. Everything that he thought he could trust went out the window. And so him just trying to churn through that and make sense of that, some things came out of his mouth that to me didn't really make a lot of sense sometimes, but for me to say, how can you think that way, instead of just saying, man, that's awful. I am sorry that I have created this in you.
And that's where we as unfaithful miss it, where we have the audacity to expect them to be perfect. And I saw this meme the other day, well, it was a while ago, that said, I don't get to decide how you heal from the trauma that I've inflicted upon you. And to hear your heart, I think, is just such a breath of fresh air. And I'm sure there's many betrayed men who wish their unfaithful female spouse would handle it the way that you have. And I'm not trying to make you this hero. Certainly you and I are far from heroes. No. We are far from heroic. However, you have made it easier by owning your part and taking initiative.
Well, and I've had a lot of help along the way. The resources that we have here at Affair Recovery have been so helpful. And I don't know where we would be really if we hadn't had this kind of to guide us and encourage us along the way.
Well, and I certainly...
I don't think anybody knows what to do. I
No.
don't think I could have ever thought of this myself.
No,
You know?
and that's why we're doing this, so that people all over the country and world can hear about what they can do to help. So now I'm going to turn the tables on you and make it really hard and say, so what were some of the things that you did that made it worse, that made it hard for your husband to heal, that just compounded the pain that you guys were wrestling with?
Well, so, I mentioned defensiveness in conversations. I did try to stay away from that, but there were times that I failed at that and I became defensive. And, there was some flooding that happened, and those times are never fun. Those times are not easy for him. So that, and I have learned that I'm really not as great a listener as I thought I was.
Neither am I. I'm working to get much better.
So a lot of the time I would listen and then try to have a fix for him, and or I would listen and think, what on earth? This doesn't make sense. How can you think that? And for him, that was almost like gaslighting him, because I was in effect saying, you're crazy for thinking that, what's wrong with you? You're flawed or something.
We're shaming them.
Yes, exactly. And so I think those two things were probably the major things that happened in our journey.
When I talk to betrayed males, they feel so they almost self-shame for their triggers and their flooding. And they feel like they shouldn't, because we're men, we're big and burly and strong. And yeah, that's true for the most part, but that's not the universal truth of who we are as men. But triggers are just absolutely maniacal for a betrayed spouse. What was your experience? What were some of the things that you had to walk through?
Yeah, well, they come out of nowhere. They can happen when you're having a conversation with friends. It can be a song that suddenly comes on the radio. It can be somebody saying somebody's name. It really does come out of the blue and blindside. And so my husband's therapist gave me some golden advice once, and she said, it's just really important to acknowledge those triggers. And that means you have to know what those triggers are, first of all, and care enough to know, to acknowledge those triggers in a way that says, honey, I understand that you're triggering, and I care that you're triggering. It matters to me that you're going through this really awful moment right now, and I know that I've created it for you. So she said, when you're in a room somewhere and maybe you're in a crowd of people or so forth, and something is said or done that and you just know that he's triggering, something as simple as putting your hand on his arm or on his shoulder, if you can't speak to it right away, just to let him know, I know you're triggering right now, and it matters to me, and I care. Or even, just a look across the room,
right?
Just making eye contact and that. But you want to always come back and talk about it and say, I understood that you were triggering, and I know why you were triggering and what that's doing to you. It matters to me.
I think when I learned how to go to Samantha and say, man, that was awful, that must have been a huge trigger for you, I would say that 30% of the time she would say, it really wasn't, but the fact that you are aware of that has helped me immensely.
Yeah, over time, I've seen that too.
People ask me this all the time, and I couldn't wait to ask you, because I know a little bit of the answer, but I don't know the total answer, and we haven't even talked about this off mic, so this is going to be a good opportunity. I have people ask me all the time, is your marriage really good, or are you just less sad? Are you just less angry? Or do you really value and love your marriage? And I want to ask you this from a woman's point of view. What is your marriage like now?
Wow. So yes, I do value my marriage. I see it as something so incredibly sacred and worth protecting now. I do love my husband. I'm in love with my husband. We've come a long way just in the way we communicate with each other through this whole process, which has been super uber helpful just for getting through this process. And I can't say that we are, 100% in utopia or anything like that. We're dealing with stuff, all the time that's leftover fallout from what I did. I realize that I've put him through the worst thing that a person can probably ever be put through in a relationship. But there is a lot of joy that we find now in our relationship. And obviously, we know enough now to know that we can't hold each other responsible for, or hold each other solely responsible for meeting each other's needs.
I asked you earlier, how is your marriage now? And the audio viewers can't see how you literally lit up. It was a complete change to your physical appearance. Your eyes got bright. I can tell that you absolutely love your husband. How did you see a revival, if you will, a resurrection to the love that you have towards him? How did you come to that?
It was first, I had to do a house cleaning in my heart. I had so many resentments for just really stupid things that I had let pile up into mountains. I focused on his faults a lot. That was pride in me that was doing that. I just did a lot of work to undo a lot of really stupid stuff in my heart, getting rid of those resentments, coming to the place where I saw him through a totally different lens.
How did you get to that lens? Because that's a vital part.
Yeah, so that was part of my work in Hope for Healing. But there's a chapter that talks about that, and one of the exercises that we did was observing him in a crowd, and he's so well liked by people. I mean, he's just,
I know him, and that's the truth. Absolutely.
He is a very likable, lovable, friendly, outgoing guy, and just to see people see so much good in him, and so as I was really focused on that for the purpose of that lesson in our book, my eyes were totally opened, and so that lens did really change.
And so you say your eyes were open. So to me, my interpretation of that, because we haven't talked about this off mic, is that to me it sounds like you were open to the possibility of saving your marriage, and you were open to what the future could hold. You had let go. You had let go, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm trying to encapsulate what you were feeling. It appears to me that you had worked through the resentments enough to let them go, to at least see what the future would hold. Is that a fair statement?
I would say so, yes.
Because I think so many unfaithfuls, male and female, we hold on to the resentment, we mine the resentment, we fuel the resentment, we pour gas on it, and then we can't understand why we can't see them in a different light, and we can't forgive them because we're stoking the fire of resentment. And until we're willing to let go of those resentments and actually forgive God I can't believe that we, would have the audacity to say that we unfaithful have to forgive, but we have to do the work of forgiveness to be able to see our spouse in a new light.
Exactly. And I'll just say that he never really did anything terrible to me. It was not like I had this huge looming thing to forgive. But in any marriage, there are little wounds that happen along the way. And when you don't deal with them right then and there, they do start to add up and make this huge pile of something that you cannot see past. And that's all you begin to see. And
you fixate on the negative.
Yes.
And that fuels the resentment, which fuels the desire to be alive, and we believe the lie that we're going to be alive in somebody else's arms.
Yes, and speaking of lies, so there were so many lies that I had to believe along the way. I had to believe that, he really doesn't love me, so it doesn't matter. Lies about just the depravity of what I was doing. Maybe I can get away with this, it's not that bad, or if he doesn't find out, he won't be hurt, nobody's going to get hurt, and then I'll just stop and ask forgiveness and it'll be gone and done.
So, Melanie, I do this with all my guests because I know that it's a chance to share from your heart, and I think anybody that's listened today would concur that you have such a beautiful heart and there's been such a work of transformation inside of you. Take a couple of minutes as we end this conversation and talk to the unfaithful female that's out there, that's trying to swim in a sea of just doubt, fear, chaos, shame, self-hatred, confusion. I mean, if you were out there years and years ago, what would you want to hear? What do you think you would need to hear?
I'm really glad that you asked that. I would say, first of all, and I'm probably going to break up when I say this, but first of all, what you did does not define you. What's happened in the past is not the final punctuation mark on your life. It just doesn't have to be. But what will define you is how you let this transform you, how you let this mold you into a maturing, very soft-hearted, loving person. Something else I would definitely encourage you to do is to not walk the journey alone. If you have someone local that you can talk to, that's great. I wouldn't stop there, though. We have a great forum for women who have been unfaithful. I have gotten so much encouragement from the women on that forum, and I've been able to give some too. But that's very important, just not doing it alone. Taking, one of the courses or more. We've got Hope for Healing, we've got EMS Weekend. With those courses, you're not working it alone. You're working it with a group of women that are there to support you and walk with you through through that journey. I would also say that there are no shortcuts in this, so just be patient. Get ready to persevere. This is not a we'll be okay in a couple months type deal. And it takes a lot of humility, to really persevere well and have patience and give your spouse space and time to heal. And give yourself space and time to heal as well. It just doesn't happen overnight. The last thing I would say is, with any of this, if you can just have a beginner's mindset, if you can be teachable and in humility, just realize that there's probably some things that you don't know. There's probably some ways that you could do things different that you have never even thought of before. And so just take it all in and see how far you can go. Because I think you'll probably surprise yourself, honestly.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to turn the tables on you, because I think there's thousands of betrayed men out there who are listening to this and either being thankful, and the viewers can't see, I'm handing you a tissue box because I know that this is a deep emotional conversation for you. So, talk to the betrayed male that's out there just wondering, man, will my wife ever get it? Will she ever wake up? Will she ever feel what you're feeling? I'm sure you didn't always feel this way. I'm sure you didn't always think this way. Take a couple of minutes and just give some hope to that betrayed male out there.
Well, let me just say that there's probably not a way that you can control your wife's ability to get it. You can control your own healing, and I hope that you will. I hope that you will do what it takes to work on your own side of recovery and just get up from this space that you're in, this pit, and know that there is hope on the other side, that there is hope walking through. And I would say also that you were always enough. This was never about you.
I venture to say that there's other men that are just frustrated. They're just, their timeline is different than yours or what have you, but they're just so frustrated because their wife or their partner just won't take the initiative. But I'd venture to say it probably took you some time before you took the initiative, right?
Yeah, it took me a little time. Yeah, it did. I definitely at the beginning was strongly encouraged, and probably a little bit prodded at first, to get on the AR website and to
do work.
To sign up, for Hope for Healing. And I was really nervous about coming to EMS weekend too. There was probably a little bit of dragging that came there.
Well, I think that this has been phenomenal. We haven't told the viewers, but I'm actually going to have your husband in very soon, and he's going to share his own thoughts and what he's been through. But I just can't thank you enough for being willing to come in and just open up your heart and open up the box of this pain and this hurt that really, to me, it doesn't sound like it's a box anymore. It sounds like it's part of who you are. You've broken the box and just like an alabaster vial just said, look, this is who I am now.
Yeah, this is my story. I can't change my story. I wish I could change my story, parts of it.
We all
sure
wish that we were sitting here talking about Bitcoin or anything.
Yeah.
But thank you for doing this. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.